I was alone in my office when my son decided I wasn't worth Christmas. That detail matters, not because loneliness is tragic. I'd made peace with solitude years ago, but because it revealed how ordinary the moment looked from the outside. No thunder, no dramatic build-up, just a flickering fluorescent light, a stack of tax filings, and a phone vibrating against an old wooden desk. Lucas's name appeared on the screen. For a brief, foolish second, my heart lifted. He didn't call much anymore, not since marrying Clara. Conversations had thinned the way rivers do during drought, still flowing, but shallow, careful. When your child stops asking questions about your life, you don't notice all at once. It happens quietly, a missed call here, a shorter reply there. I wiped my glasses with the corner of my shirt and opened the message. Dad, don't come for Christmas this year. Clara's parents think it would be better if we kept things elevated. They want to be around people who match the direction we're heading. I stared at the words until they blurred. Elevated, direction, those weren't cruel words. That's what made them dangerous. Cruelty wounds, but politeness erases. This wasn't rejection wrapped in anger. It was rejection dressed as practicality. I read it again, slower this time, as if cadence might soften it. It didn't. Outside my window, Miami traffic crawled along Biscayne Boulevard, headlights reflecting off rain-dark pavement. Life continued with the indifference only cities manage. Somewhere, someone was laughing. Somewhere else, a family was planning a dinner that no longer included me. I didn't reply. I set the phone face down and leaned back in my chair. The leather creaked under my weight, a sound I'd heard thousands of times. This office had been mine for over 2 decades. Same desk, same filing cabinet with the dented drawer, same cheap coffee maker that burned more than it brewed. It looked exactly like what people expected from a man like me. A small man, in their estimation. I caught my reflection in the darkened monitor. 62 years old, thinning gray hair. Wrinkles earned the hard way, a plain shirt from a department store that didn't pretend to be anything else. If I were judging by appearances alone, I would have agreed with them. That was the irony. 31 years earlier, I held Lucas in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and fear. His mother left when he was 12, packed her things while he was at school, left a note like an afterthought. I remember the way he looked at me that night, searching my face for answers I didn't have. So I became to people, the father who never failed him, and the man who never explained himself. I worked double shifts. I learned to cook badly and parent patiently. I saved. I invested. I kept my ambitions quiet and my promises loud. When Lucas needed tuition, I had it. When he needed help with a down payment, I didn't hesitate. He never asked how, and I never volunteered the truth. I used to think that was humility. Maybe it was convenience. Or maybe I believed, mistakenly, that character would speak louder than context. That night, I locked the office, walked to my car, and sat there longer than necessary. The engine was off, the radio was silent. I imagined Lucas at Clara's parents' house, polished tableware, rehearsed laughter, conversations that measured worth in job titles and neighborhoods. I wondered when my presence had become an inconvenience. At home, I poured a glass of water and stood in the kitchen without turning on the lights. The house felt larger than usual. Empty chairs have a way of accusing you. I thought about replying, explaining, apologizing for something I didn't quite understand. Instead, I opened a drawer I rarely touched. At the back, beneath old receipts and forgotten keys, rested a single metal key taped to an index card. No label, no explanation. I held it between my fingers, feeling its familiar weight. I hadn't planned to use it. Not this way. Not now. But something had shifted. Not anger, not revenge. Awareness. Lucas wanted to move forward with people who could help his future. I stared at the key and exhaled slowly. Perhaps it was time he learned exactly who had been standing behind him all along. People assume invisibility happens to you. They're wrong. Invisibility is usually a decision. Long before Lucas sent that message, long before Clara or her parents decided I wasn't suitable company, I had already chosen a life that required very little explanation. I learned early that the more people know about you, the more they think they're entitled to an opinion. So I kept my life simple on the surface. A modest office, predictable hours, clothes that never drew a second glance. When people asked what I did, I told them I was an accountant, and I let the word shrink me in their minds. It saved time. What I didn't tell them was that accounting had never been my ambition. It was my anchor. It gave me access to numbers, patterns, and the kind of quiet observation that rewards patience. While others chased attention, I studied behavior. While they panicked, I waited. My first serious investment came during a year when fear was everywhere and courage was rare. Markets were collapsing. Good ideas were being abandoned simply because the timing was wrong. I didn't need applause. I needed opportunity. One investment worked, then another. I learned to fund people instead of plans, to listen longer than I spoke, to walk away from anything that required my name in lights. Anonymity kept the work clean. It also kept my life uncomplicated. At least, that's what I told myself. By the time Lucas reached college, I was already living two parallel lives. In one, I was a father who attended graduations, paid tuition, drove an aging sedan that always smelled faintly of paper and coffee. In the other, I was backing companies before they became names, solving problems before they became headlines. The two worlds never touched, not even when Lucas married into the Ward family. Martin Ward spoke about success the way insecure men often do, loudly and often. Every dinner was a performance, every story a reminder that he was someone to be taken seriously. Elise nodded beside him, eyes scanning the room, always measuring. They looked at me and saw exactly what I designed. A man who stayed quiet because he had nothing to add. When Ward Logistics came up in conversation, they spoke with pride. I listened politely, asked harmless questions, and said nothing about the fact that the company had nearly folded years earlier. That banks had turned them away, that a silent investor, me, had stepped in through layers of intermediaries to keep it alive. I told myself it was for Lucas. I told myself love justified discretion. What I didn't admit was that hiding had become comfortable. Lucas absorbed their world faster than I expected. His posture changed. His vocabulary shifted. He stopped inviting me into conversations that might embarrass him. I noticed, but I waited. I always waited. That's the danger of patience. Eventually, it starts to look like permission. By the time his message arrived, the image of me as Les had already settled into place. Not because of who I was, but because I never corrected the story. Holding that small metal key in my kitchen that night, I finally understood something I'd avoided for years. I hadn't just protected my privacy. I'd allowed my own son to misunderstand me. And now, that misunderstanding had chosen from me. The key fit smoothly, like it had been waiting for my hand. Behind a false panel in a cabinet I'd built myself years ago sat a small safe. No alarms, no drama, just steel, intention, and time. Inside were documents I hadn't looked at in years, not because I'd forgotten them, but because I'd never needed to remember. Until now, I didn't feel excitement opening it, or anger. What I felt was clarity, the kind that arrives when pretending becomes heavier than truth. I spread the folders across my desk, the paper whispering as it moved. Early investment agreements, property deeds, digital access keys written in my own careful handwriting, evidence of a life lived quietly, on purpose. I thought of Lucas's words again. People who match the direction we're heading. It wasn't an insult anymore. It was instruction. I made one call first to a man who never asked why my name appeared under different entities. He answered on the second ring. "I need a place," I said, "oceanfront. Available now." There was a pause, brief and professional. "I have something," he replied. "It isn't modest." "I'm done being modest," I said. That surprised both of us. By afternoon, the paperwork was moving. By evening, the penthouse was mine. I didn't tour it. I didn't negotiate. I didn't imagine myself living there. That wasn't the point. This wasn't about luxury. It was about alignment. Standing in that vast, glass-wrapped space later that night, I felt no urge to celebrate. The city stretched beneath me, glittering and anonymous. I'd helped build pieces of it without ever leaving fingerprints. I could have stayed invisible forever, but invisibility only works when it doesn't cost you the people you love. I sent a handful of invitations, not mass messages, not announcements. Personal calls, warm voices on the other end. People who remembered where they'd started. People who didn't confuse wealth with worth. They accepted without hesitation, not because of the view, because of trust. As I ended each call, I felt something loosen in my chest. I wasn't revealing myself out of spite. I wasn't setting a trap. I was simply allowing the two halves of my life to exist in the same room. That was all. Still, I knew once the door opened, there would be no closing it again. The story Lucas believed about his father was about to collapse under its own weight. Whether he chose to step out from beneath it, or stay buried, would be up to him. The apartment filled the way meaningful spaces always do, gradually, then all at once. There was no spectacle in the arrivals, no announcements. Just handshakes that lingered a second longer than necessary. Conversations that resumed easily, like chapters picking up where they'd left off. The kind of gathering where no one needed to prove why they belonged. I watched from a distance, a glass of water in my hand, listening more than speaking. Old habits die slowly. The city beyond the windows glowed, indifferent and beautiful. From this height, everything looked calm, ordered, manageable. I wondered if Lucas felt the same way when he imagined his future. Clean edges, controlled company, no awkward presences to explain. The first photo appeared online around 8. I knew because my phone buzzed, then buzzed again. I didn't check it. If something was coming, it deserved to arrive on its own. Just after 9, the elevator doors opened again. This time, the room felt it. Lucas stepped out first, uncertain, his shoulders pulled tight like he was bracing for weather. Clara followed, her expression fixed in a way that suggested she'd rehearsed several reactions and discarded them all. For a moment, no one spoke, not because they were surprised, but because they understood exactly what was happening. "Dad," Lucas said quietly, "I don't." There are moments when a lifetime of choices compress into a single breath. This was one of them. I saw my son as he was, not the boy I raised, not the man he wanted to become, but the person standing there now, unsure which version of himself would survive the night. "You saw," I said. He nodded. "I didn't know." "That's true," I replied. "You didn't." Martin Ward stood near the windows, frozen. He hadn't planned on being recognized, but recognition doesn't ask permission. His certainty had drained from his face, replaced by calculation, then fear. I didn't raise my voice when I spoke. I didn't need to. I explained things simply. How investments work. How silence can be strategic. How loyalty doesn't announce itself. No accusations. No dramatics. Just facts. Lucas tried to interrupt, stopped himself. Clara didn't speak at all. When he asked if we could talk privately, I shook my head. You didn't make your decision privately, I said. So no. The room didn't shift toward him. It didn't shift away either. It simply listened. That, more than anything, seemed to unsettle him. Silence doesn't always need to be broken. Sometimes it simply waits. I looked at Lucas, not for words, not for regret, but for understanding. There's a difference. Regret wants relief. Understanding accepts consequence. I didn't raise you to be impressed by surfaces, I said calmly. I raised you to ask questions. You stopped doing that. Lucas swallowed. I was trying to build something. So was I. I replied. And I never asked you to carry it, only to respect it. I explained, without bitterness, why I stayed quiet, why anonymity mattered. Not to feel powerful, but to let others grow without my shadow over them. Everything I did, I said, was meant to give you space, not to make myself small. He apologized, slowly, honestly. It still wasn't enough. You didn't come because you missed me, I said. You came because your picture of me changed. The truth settled between us. I don't know what you expected tonight. I continued. Forgiveness, access, a reset. But nothing about me changed. Only what you thought I was worth. I gestured, not to the view, but to the people. These, the substance of the room. This, I said, is alignment. I asked them to leave, not cruelly, not loudly, just clearly. When the elevator doors closed, the room slowly returned to itself. Later, alone by the window, I watched the city glow beneath me, unchanged. I didn't feel victorious. I felt finished. Some lessons arrived too late to fix anything, but right on time to tell the truth. And for the first time in years, that was enough.